Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. The season of Lent begins with Psalm 51. You are likely familiar with this psalm, or at least part of it. Create in me a clean heart, O God, one verse familiar to us says, as it points us to our sin and our need for the cleansing that only God can bring. In fact, in the early days of the church, Lent was a time for instruction about the faith for new believers who were then baptized on Palm Sunday and then received their first communion on Easter. You might say that Lent was a time when they prepared to pass through the cleansing waters of baptism. This week I want to look at passing through the waters, and certainly in all that we will look at this week, the events are connected to baptism. We will see themes of salvation, promise, and God's presence connected in all these stories. In fact, in the Old Testament, there are 5 specific times described when the waters were divided. That's what we will look at together this week. Now, of course, whenever we mention divided waters, the first thing most everyone thinks of is Moses, the Red Sea, and the Hebrew people crossing on dry land. People of a certain age picture Charlton Heston as Moses in a dramatic scene of the waters dividing. While that is the most well-known, and we will talk about that one tomorrow, there are other equally interesting times that water was divided. The first one in the Bible comes during the story of creation. It happens on day 2 of creation. You know how when God decided to create the world, the first thing God said was, "Let there be light." Probably many of us think of this like God turning on a light switch. Suddenly the whole place was flooded with light. Certainly that might be how it was. But I think the idea of light might also refer to knowledge or understanding, wisdom, or even rationality or sense along with actual light. You see, before this, there was only darkness, which can easily be understood as a metaphor for the unknown, the place of confusion that doesn't make sense and you can't understand. It's almost as if God said, let's make sense of things. Let's not do this stumbling around in the darkness. Let's bring the light of wisdom and sense and knowledge to the creation of all that is. So light, and I think wisdom was made on day 1. Then comes day 2. Here's what Genesis says. And God said, "Let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." So God made the dome and separated the waters that were under the dome from the waters that were above the dome. And it was so. God called the dome sky, and there was evening, and there was morning, the second day. This might be surprising to many of us, but you see, in those days they didn't have the scientific understanding of the world that we have now. They envisioned that there was water, and God divided the water, making a space for the earth in between. So there was water above the sky and water below the earth. When it rained, for example, they thought the water was coming in through windows in the sky. And by the way, the sky was called the firmament, and in the Hebrew word for that conveys the idea of beaten metal. They envisioned the sky to be something solid, like beaten metal, that held back the primordial waters from flooding in. There are several things this might mean. God took specific action to create all that is, first making space for it all to happen. God took specific action to make creation a safe space for us. God took specific action to do away with darkness, unwisdom, and the chaos of the waters, and to provide for us a place of beauty and safety and rationality. God took specific action in wisdom. God took specific action in love for us who weren't even made yet. From the very beginning of the Bible, the waters were divided and a place was prepared for us. Just as God has prepared a place for us with God in heaven, so God provided a place for us here where we can live and love and celebrate the blessings of God. Understood this way, from the very beginning, all we are, all we have, everything that exists and thrives under the blessing of God. It's an amazing grace indeed. From the very beginning, we belonged to God forever. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.